I'm Nadia, dietitian and certified intuitive eating counsellor, and welcome to Good Enough Nutrition, the podcast, a space where we chat all about nutrition and well-being, intuitive eating, body image, and a sprinkle of all things periods and hormones. I'm here to remind you that guilt has no place near our food or bodies, and that you are good enough as you are, always. So let's dig in. Hello, my cool cucumbers. Welcome back to Good Enough Nutrition, the podcast. Thanks for being here. Can you believe we've already made it up to episode 4? And today, I can't wait to chat all about the all or nothing mindset, or more specifically, we're going to chat about choice and what it would look like if we had more than 2 options. But before we get into that, as usual, I wanted to chat about something that's been lighting me up recently, and that is actually rejoining the gym, funnily enough. So it has been more than 3 years since I last went to a gym. Pre-COVID was when I was going, and so it's really, really interesting to be able to reflect on my relationship with movement and how that's changed in the past 3 years since I haven't been doing much formalized movement at all. And so 3 years ago, it had already changed a lot compared to what it was, 10 years ago. But even now, I can feel this subtle shift in the way that, I can categorically say that moving my body, really, there's no motivation to do with what my body looks like anymore, which if you'd asked me that 10 years ago, it would have been a different story. But also, I feel so much more in touch with my body and my body cues in terms of being able to read those messages when my body is telling me that it wants to do something new. And that was a big part of me rejoining the gym. I could feel my body sending me messages going, hey, you need a little bit more resistance training in your life. I wouldn't say that I'm old by any stretch of the imagination, but I am getting older, and I could definitely feel that having a bit more strength, having a little bit more muscle tone to be able to do things like lift heavy boxes or, even little things like bending over in the garden. I knew that my body was actually crying out for a little bit more formalized resistance training to support those things. But I can categorically say that that's really my main reason for going to the gym, is around, I guess, functionality, body functionality, as well as I've always had, for a long time, I've had a bit of a niggly lower back. So finally getting around to kind of doing some exercises that support my lower back, because let's be honest, I'm sitting most of the day. So that's really something that's been lighting me up. And if you have a story about how your relationship with movement has changed, I would love to hear from you. Maybe I'll do a whole podcast episode on this in future if it's something you guys are interested in. And as always, I'll put a little carousel of images on my Instagram so that you can see what I'm talking about. And I will say, actually, before I move on, that 2 things have been a real game changer in terms of rejoining a gym. Actually, my partner and I went and visited a few different gyms in the process, and we ended up going with this one gym, firstly because it's 5 minutes away. It's very close to home, and that for me makes all the difference. And secondly, it's not a bro-like gym. It's actually got a lot of rehab component to it, with lots of exercise physiologists and physios, and there's like a cold plunge and a hydrotherapy pool and all that stuff. So it's really nice because it's more kind of rehab, functional oriented, rather than, all around lifting heavy weights and gains and checking yourself out in the mirror, which isn't really the type of gym that I'm into these days. So that's been a really nice shift in terms of the environment that I'm moving my body in. Feels really supportive now. Okay, all right, enough about me. I really want to chat about the all or nothing mindset when it comes to nutrition and well-being. When I did the episode on good enough nutrition, I mentioned some diet red flags to look out for. One is that they're dogmatic, rule-based, and often very black or white or all or nothing. And that's really what I want to talk about today. And essentially it comes down to choice. In the world of wellness, we're so often made to believe that we only have two choices, right? It's all or nothing, good or bad, right or wrong, yes or no. For example, it might be things like eat the cupcake, don't eat the cupcake, go and exercise, don't go and exercise, drink the coffee, don't drink the coffee, right? And even I fall into that trap sometimes. It's like, oh, I don't feel like meditating, but I know I quote unquote should, right? Meditate, don't meditate. And I think there's a couple of reasons why we get into a pickle in this situation, why wellness or well-being or nutrition is always framed in this very kind of black and white, yes or no way. The first is, as always, thanks to diet or wellness culture being so sneaky, we're made to believe that, the more exercise or the more vegetables or the less calories, the better. Exercise is a really good example of this. It is essentially the main relationship with exercise we see in society is the more the better, or it doesn't count unless we're sweating. And as a result, we're made to feel guilty if we don't want to choose the quote-unquote right or quote-unquote virtuous option. Thanks to diet culture being very sneaky, we're made to believe that there is a right or wrong. And secondly, sometimes as humans, we don't feel like either of those options. We don't feel like either of the choices that we're giving ourselves on the back of diet culture. And we actually forget that there's always more than two options. So here's what I've got to say. Firstly, diet culture is bullshit. Do what you feel like and don't feel guilty for it. It was created to oppress you and to keep you down, leading a small life. So don't do that. Don't let it do that to you. And secondly, I'm all about the practical. So I came up with a question to ask yourself when you feel like you are stuck in that shoulding mindset. I should do this or I shouldn't do this. Ask yourself, what would it look like if I had more than two options? What would it look like if I had more than two choices? And then figure out if any of those other options sound better to you. Let me give you an example, make this really practical. So if your mind says, I quote unquote should exercise, but I don't feel like it, here we're implying that there's only two options. Exercise or don't exercise. Does exercising sound good to you? Great, do that. Does exercising not sound good to you? Okay, great. F diet culture, do that. But sometimes neither of those options feel quite right. You feel stuck either way. Your body's kind of saying, oh, I'm frozen, I'm in paralysis. Neither of them sound good. So that's where the question comes in. We ask ourselves, what would it look like if I had more than two options? And then just start to brainstorm. I could exercise hard, medium, slow, or dawdle and stop and smell the flowers. I could walk to a location, such as a lookout or a beach, and admire the view. I could phone a friend while I'm out for a walk. I could stay home and play fetch with the dog or catch with the kids or weed the garden or maybe even do some light stretching or YouTube yoga. Or I could light a candle and do a meditation, or I could choose active rest. So many options when we actually come to think about it. It's not just exercise, don't exercise. There are so many possible choices. So feel it out. Feel how those options sound to the body. How does your body respond? Does it light up to any of those ideas? And even if you do choose rest, that is a-okay. Sometimes rest is the option that our body is calling for. And if you do, try to choose it actively, right? So you don't, try to rest but feel guilty about it. That's not rest. That is, pretending to rest, but then your mind's still beating you up for it. So if you can, try not to do that. If you're choosing rest, truly allow yourself to enjoy it. Now, I am a hypocrite in this front. This is a situation where I need some of my own medicine, and I'm getting better at it, right? Because sometimes rest is the answer that your body is calling for, and being able to choose it and not feel guilty for it is a wonderful skill to build. Okay. Hopefully that made sense, and that example, I think the exercise example is a really good one, because at least I know a lot of people get caught in that, exercise, don't exercise, and there's only two options. But the same applies for a lot of things, including nutrition. I want to hear from you. Where in your life do you notice this all or nothing mindset coming up? Where are you hearing the shoulds? And that will give you a clue. Let me know over on Instagram. My handle's @NadiaMaxwellNutrition. Share a story. Write out what your mind says are your only two choices. And then I would love to see what you come up with, all the other options that you hadn't even considered before. Thank you so much for being here, as always, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Thank you so much for listening to Good Enough Nutrition. If you have thoughts or questions from today's episode, hit me up over on my Instagram @NadiaMaxwellNutrition. If you have a moment to rate or review the podcast, that would be amazing. Or share that you're listening on your stories and tag me. I absolutely love to see it. As always, remember that guilt has no place near our food or bodies, and you are good enough as you are always.